The purpose of this video is to provide hopefully a simpler instruction on how to add sleeves to the triangle shawl made in the Triangle Kimono Granny Square tutorial that I made like 4 years ago. And so what I did is I no longer have that shawl, it's long gone, but what I did is I worked up another shawl using the same instruction from that original tutorial. So hopefully this will just provide some extra instruction or make it a little bit more clear on how to add the sleeves. And so to begin, I want to show you where we're adding the sleeves because I don't think I made that too apparent in that original video. But essentially, we have the entire shawl complete, and it can't fit on frame because it's pretty large and I'm on my floor right now, but here is our triangle shawl. We have the point down here at the bottom and then the two other ends of the triangles up there. So the shawl is shaped like this. It's going to fold this way and this way, and essentially this forms the cardigan part. And so it folds like this, and the sleeves will be added on either side here. So where is that when we unfold it? So when we unfold it, the sleeves then are in the middle of the two equal length sides. So I wanted to show you that to hopefully make that a little bit more clear. And now I'm going to move to my table, bring us a little bit closer, and show you another way, hopefully a simpler way, how to add the sleeves. Okay, so to start the sleeve, what we're going to do is want to find the midpoint of one of the sides I showed you where the sleeve goes. So all I did here was count the amount of clusters, so granny clusters or groups of 3 double crochets that I had along my side. So I counted down, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. And I had 18 total on each of the equidistant or same length sides where the sleeves are going. So then I counted until I got to my midpoint. So I marked this here, and I have 9 clusters on each side of the midpoint. So my sleeve is going to be about 7 spaces long. So counting this one, I'm going to count 1 and then 1, 2, 3. So it's going to start here and then end 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's going to be about this long. And I apologize, I couldn't exactly tell how many were in my original. However, I believe it was maybe either 10 or 11, but I believe this yarn's a little bit bigger, so I'm going to do less for this specific one. However, it's very adjustable depending on how big your yarn is or how big you want your sleeve to be. But for this yarn, I'm going to be doing 7 spaces wide. So now I'm going to grab my working yarn and I'm going to make a slip knot and place it on my hook. And I think I mentioned that instead of working circular, I'm going to work this sleeve flat, hoping that that is a little bit easier. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So starting in your first hole that you've identified, and definitely mark it with a stitch marker if that makes it a little bit easier for you, I'm going to insert my hook and work a slip stitch. Now my working yarn and crochet hook are attached to the piece and ready to start. So now we're going to work in granny square motif or granny motif, placing 3 double crochets in each space with 1 chain in between. This matches the pattern from the original triangle shawl that I showed in that tutorial. So that's what I'm following with here. So I'm going to chain 3 to begin, and that's how you'll begin each row. Well, actually no, that's how you'll begin every other row, but I'll show that in a second. And work 2 more double crochets. Okay, so that's my first granny square cluster. I'm then going to chain 1 and work another granny square cluster here. So I'm just going to finish the the row using that same motif, just 3 double crochets in every chain space. And chaining 1 in between each space. So here I have my midpoint, so we're about halfway. And don't worry about that stitch marker, I'll be able to remove that after we're all done. And so I'm just going to work until I have 7 total granny square clusters for this sleeve. So what am I at now? I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I need 2 more. Okay. Okay, so that's my first row, and if I double check, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's my first row. So now granny motif, when worked flat, has 2 rows that are repeating. The one we just did, and then this next one. So to begin the second row and the second repeat row, I'm going to chain 4. This acts as 1 double crochet and a chain space, which represents the chain space in between each cluster. So I've chained 4, and I'm going to flip my work, which there's a lot of work to flip on this, and then just continue the granny motif until we get to the last cluster. So, as mentioned, that's 3 double crochets in every chain space, chaining 1, and then working 3 more double crochets. Okay, so after I finish this granny cluster, I have 1 cluster left. And so obviously there's no more chain spaces to work another cluster in. So what we're going to do is chain 1 and then mirror what we did at the beginning. So we're going to chain 1 and then work a double crochet into the 3rd chain of the chain 3 of the previous row. Which, if you think about it, is very similar, or is like a mirror of the chain 4 at the beginning of this row, because that was a counted for a double crochet in a chain space, and this is a chain space double crochet. So those are the 2 row repeats. I believe I did 5 rows in the original tutorial, so I'm gonna hop off camera and complete however many rows, and then you can complete however many rows you would like to complete, and then we'll meet together to sew up the arm. So in my original video I did 9 rows. For this I ended up doing 7. It's about 8 inches, and I was happy with that, so I ended it there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to end the row by working 1 slip stitch, pulling that tight. And then we want to cut a tail, but we want it to be long enough that we can sew up our side. So I'm going to be pretty conservative here and go longer than I need. And then once you've cut your long tail, you can go ahead and pull that through that loop. And then by pulling that tight, you create a double knot. So now we have our flat sleeve that we're ready to work into a round sleeve by sewing it. Now you can crochet this shut, your whatever preferred method. Okay, so I'm going to be using whip stitch, which in my opinion is one of the simplest stitches out there. And so I ended on this side, and what I'm going to do is find the chain 3 of the beginning of the row and work through the 3rd chain of the chain 3, going from outside to away from me, and then pulling my yarn shut, and then this now attaches the 2 sides. So the way whip stitch works is we're essentially going to work towards us, pull, work towards us, pull. Or work away from yourself, pull, work away from yourself. But either way, you want to be working in the same direction. And to keep it even easier, I'm actually just going to go through the posts of the double crochets on the outside edges of the sleeves. So actually what I'm going to do is go through, so zoom in a little, go through each post twice since it's a double crochet. So I'm going to take my needle, go through both posts, and pull it tight. And then I'm going to do that again. So now my yarn's coming out the other side. Without creating a knot, I'm going to push it through again. Let me widen out. So you can see when I say don't make a knot, you don't want to go through this loop of working sewing yarn whenever you're sewing. And just make sure that the yarn is on top of the 2 stitches. So that secured the first double crochet. And you might just have to tighten it as you go. And so now I'm going to work through the next 2. So I'm going to work through, again, ensuring that we don't create a knot, and just going to pull that tight. And then I'm going to work through again. And again, if you don't like whip stitch or you don't like how it works up, you can do any method you prefer. So since I went through this twice, I'm going to go through the next 2 double crochets, front and back, working away from me and pulling our working yarn through. Whoopsies, I just pulled it out of my needle. Okay, so that was the first whip stitch through there. I'm going to rethread my needle. And then go through again. So I'm just going to work whip stitch until I get done with the sleeve. And so you only want to work, well, I'll explain it once I get there, but really you only want to work through the rows that were added to be the sleeve. You don't want to attach anything on the actual triangle shawl part, because the way this kimono or cardigan type is worked up is it's very flowy under the armpit. You don't want to secure anything there, otherwise it'll get tight in a weird way. So I'll just continue working. Okay, so now I'm on my very last 2 posts or sideways double crochets in my sleeve. And so I'm going to work 2 more whip stitches through that row. And then here's what I was talking about. This now becomes the body of the triangle shawl. We do not want to attach these two together. We just want to make sure we're only attaching the sides of the sleeve. And so if you worked, so I worked 7 rows, and so you'll just ensure that you only worked, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sideways double crochets, and that way you know, okay, I didn't work any of the body. And so now it looks like that. And to end it, I don't have a very sophisticated way, but I'm essentially just going to work through again. And now we want to work a knot. So I'm going to pull my whip stitch until I have a little bit of a loop, and then pull it through again to the loop, and that creates a single knot. And then I'll actually go through that loop again, whoops, and work a double knot. So again, if you have a way that you prefer better, please do that. I'm not a sewing expert. I usually try to crochet my pieces together, but for the ease of the tutorial, that's how I'm going to secure it. So now I'm going to cut a tail that's shorter and thread my darning needle and just thread it through the nearest cluster. Then I'm going to trim that tail and then trim the tail that was at the beginning of my sleeve. So that is how you work the sleeve. I'm going to try to get it on screen here. So here you can see it off the body, and you'll just repeat that same process on the other side. I hope that provides a little bit of clarity. If there are still any questions, please leave a comment down below and I'll try to help out the best I can.